Welcome to Perspectives, where we take a deep dive into the issues of the day and where we analyze opinions. I am Olatorera Oniru. I want to start off with a birthday shout-out to Queen of Perspectives, Ruth Osime. Happy birthday. Your presence is missed today. As we continue to celebrate the month of love, we are delving into the topic of homelessness and human rights. How do we rise above extreme economic hardship? We have a very informational show planned, so stay tuned while we get started. Welcome back to Perspectives here on Arise News. In 2023, Nigeria's Independent National Electoral Commission declared a winner of the 16th presidential tenure. Since then, the Naira to dollar exchange rate has increased from 750 Naira per dollar to 1,500 Naira per dollar. Prices of certain basic needs, such as food and medication, have increased by over 200%. And the cost of education, one of the most critical sectors of our national economy, has also increased by over 200% across many public and private universities. Let's not forget the 160% increase in the cost of petroleum products in a crude oil-rich nation, all within less than 1 year. It is highly difficult and almost impossible to sugarcoat the depth of hardship majority of Nigerians are regressed into. The depth of poverty, homelessness, hunger, torture, wrongful incarcerations, and the many unjust issues citizens are suffering through today remain a blatant and continued violation of human rights. Nigeria's annual GDP is IMF estimated at over $250 billion, yet over 90% of citizens live in strangulating penury. The country boasts of several identifiable government mansions, but no identifiable mass governmental homeless shelters. The country boasts of crude oil, but imports 95% of refined petroleum. As crime and financial begging increase nationwide, we need to take a step back and ask, how can we unite, unlearn, relearn, and take momentous actions to rise above all forms of extreme hardship and injustice? Today we have special guests who are knowledgeable on the level of economic hardship being faced today and also knowledgeable on how deeply the nation needs economic progression. Intense discussions coming up shortly, but let's watch this special report. Perspectives will be right back.
As the world continues to evolve and grow, change of various government policies around the world has its effects, whether good or bad, on the living conditions in different countries. In the past few years, especially since the COVID-19 pandemic crippled a lot of economies, we've seen countries go through economic hardship as they seek solutions to fix the problem. This has also affected the living conditions of people who have been thrown out in the streets for one reason or the other. Of the top 10 countries in Africa with the highest level of homelessness, Nigeria and Egypt are leading with 24.4 million and 12 million people respectively, living without a place they can call home. The other 8 countries are DR Congo with over 5 million people, Somalia with over 2 million people, Sudan with 2.7 million people, Ethiopia with over 2.6 million people, South Sudan, Cameroon, Mozambique, and Burkina Faso follow in that order. Nigeria particularly has a dire housing situation, with its home ownership level being as low as 25% of its 200 million population. The country's housing deficit is estimated variously at 17 million, 20 million, 22 million, and 28 million units, through the central government once insisted there was no deficit in the country. However, the degree of homelessness in Africa varies from one region to the other. In some countries, homelessness is driven by armed conflict and internal displacement, as people are forced to flee their homes due to the violence or socio-political persecution. While often overshadowed by other pressing concerns, such as poverty and disease, homelessness is a critical issue that demands attention. Today on Perspectives, we will be taking a look at how to solve this urgent problem of homelessness, what the government can do to address the rise in people living on the streets due to one reason or the other.
We're heading for a short break, but do please stay with us because when we get back, we'll be introducing our special guests. Former presidential candidate, Dr. Adesina Fagbenro-Byron, and human rights lawyer, Effiong. Perspectives will return in just a moment. Welcome back to Perspectives here on Arise News. That was indeed a very informative report. Now time to welcome our special guest. First is Dr. Adesina Fagbenro-Byron, a co-founder and former presidential candidate of COA Party during the 2019 general elections. Dr. Fagbenro-Byron is also a former director of operations of Labour Party's Presidential Campaign Council. He served previously as governance advisor with the United Kingdom's Department for International Development. Byron is a lawyer and a very passionate Afro-jazz musician. And also joining us today is Effiong, a human rights lawyer and principal counsel at Effiong Law Chambers. He describes himself as an enemy of oppressors who is strongly committed to ending corruption and injustice across Nigeria. Very warm welcome to you both. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Olatorera.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Mr. Fagbenro-Byron, I'm sure you must recall the intense hope Nigerians had a year ago, 2 years ago, leading up to the presidential elections. Yes. How would you compare that hope then to the hope we have now, and how the minimum wage is still below is about 30,000 naira?
Well, Olatorera, thank you for having me on the studio. Of course, Nigerians generally are very hopeful people. We are optimists by nature. We are optimists on account of our environment. You look at the Nigerian environment, you see the kind of natural resources, and you see the human beings with so much talent. You also see the politics. Going directly to your question, in terms of the expectations we had, well, it will depend from the different perspectives. My perspective, I wasn't in APC. I didn't support APC. Obviously, I was supporting Labour Party. But having said that, when APC won and when Tinubu was declared president, I was a presidential candidate myself, and I know what it is to aspire to be presidential candidate. I had no choice but to actually hope that whoever won and whoever wins, would succeed. Now, in terms of our expectations, I'm not sure that our expectations are being met at the rate and at the pace which we expected to have been met. I think there has been some disappointments. Of course, you've recounted a number of figures, real figures that speak to the Nigerian situation now. The costs of living, the foreign exchange, quite a number of things, insecurity and all that. Nigerians didn't expect that things will get so bad. I mean, we thought that things were bad enough when the government took over before the last elections. But we were hoping that, that certain things will start picking up. Having said that, I am not one to foreclose. The gestation period of policy, can take time. Of course, we will observe and we will identify where certain steps that should have been taken, that probably would have made things better, right, were not taken. Is it too late? If it's not too late, can they be taken? The message I have for Nigerians is that, when the rain falls, it doesn't fall on one man's house alone. There's a government in place today, declared by the Supreme Court, Tinubu is in power today. It behoves all of us as much as possible, first of all, to hope and desire that it succeeds, either by chance, by mistake, or by the collective contribution and the pressure
Are you familiar with the current hardships Nigeria being faced?
Absolutely.
Do you have some specific examples?
Well, we all have these examples. I mean, the foreign exchange dovetails into several other things. Price of goods, the prices increase in fuel has dovetailed into the prices of food. The insecurity in terms of what's happening in the rural areas has dovetailed into agric. It has dovetailed into food production. It has dovetailed into our incapacity to store food for the rainy season. People are no longer bold enough. You can't just ask people to go into the farms and go into agric.
Right.
It can't happen again.
And the hope they've had for 60 years, you want them to continue having that. I think there's someone that said they should continue praying. Are you of that belief too?
I'm not, I don't fall into that category of culture. I think we've prayed. I think God has done his best. I think everything that Nigeria needs to succeed, God has provided it for us. Say the hope that they've had for 60 years, except you want to interrogate, we don't have enough time in this program to interrogate why and how we have gotten to this position. We have gotten to this position, and I can tell you, I can bet you, those who have been responsible, it's a collective responsibility. Don't let us separate ourselves. However, some people have, those who have held themselves out, right, to have told us that they had solutions and could have been implemented. They have probably performed less than Nigerians would have expected. I ask Nigerians themselves, do they read manifestos? Do they really, how do we interrogate? How do we choose leaders? Right now, the truth of the matter is that Nigeria is in a fragile state. Nigeria is fragile. And fragility simply means that, we have to be very careful.
Absolutely. I want to bring in our second guest, Inibehe Effiong. Inibehe, you're a human rights activist, and you've seen several cases across the country of citizens going through this economic hardship.
Yes.
I want to bring you in. Personally, I've experienced people who are going through homelessness at the moment. Foreclosures, landlord had to kick them out. There's no money to be able to pay for the next month's rent. And there's a lot of financial begging going on in the country right now because people don't have the very next meal. They just don't know where it's going to come from. There's high unemployment. You know the problem. So tell us, what are the governmental support systems people can turn into when all seems bleak?
Well, for me, at the very heart of the crisis of governance, the very horrendous economic stagnation and debilitating social structure that the country is experiencing under the President Bola Ahmed Tinubu administration is what I call the duplicity of his campaign mantra, Renewed Hope Agenda. And I say duplicity because if you are saying that you are coming to government to renew hope, that presupposes that there is already hope that is going to be renewed. And anyone who lived under the very traumatic and agonizing years of the Buhari regime will know that there was no hope for the period that Buhari was president in this country. The APC government led by President Buhari had run the country to the ground. Insecurity had become a daily thing. People were being slaughtered in their homes. The economy had degenerated. The exchange rate was very bad at the time. Our institutions, the educational institutions were in crisis. SASU had gone on strike. Even our healthcare system was nothing to write home about. Buhari consistently flew to Britain in search of medical care. So for me, rule of law had collapsed. There was complete disregard for court orders. There was a total state of anarchy under the Buhari administration. So when you say you are coming to renew hope, I quarrel with that campaign slogan. I don't see the need for it. I mean, if he had even said, just left it at hope, the word renewal or renew or renewed, is something that Nigerians have to interrogate. Was they really hope to be renewed? And I'm starting on that basis. Now, I also have a problem with the direction of the government because the president seems to have somehow zoom out or technically log out, of the reality of the Nigerian people. The government in one breath is saying that oh, we have just come in a few months, give us some time, we've effected some fundamental policy changes in the economy. These policies will need time to materialize for citizens to feel the positive impacts of the policies. But what we are seeing on a daily basis is a continuous assault on the sensibility of the Nigerian people, right? If you are saying that because the economy is bad, you are taking steps to revive the economy, one would have thought that a government that is sincere and honest in its own expenditure, in its own priorities, will also live in a way that we are not dissipating funds unnecessarily. You cannot have a situation, right, where Nigerians cannot afford basic commodities in the market. A situation where inflation has become scandalous. A situation where people cannot even afford, right? Many families cannot afford a cup of gari, a cup of rice, right? And then the president is saying he wants to use 5 billion to acquire a presidential yacht. The president is telling Nigerians he wants to use 7 billion to build a lodge for himself and the vice president in Abuja, in Lagos, sorry. And then we just heard a few hours ago that about 500 million has been approved by the president for inauguration of the National Minimum Wage Committee. So what Tinubu is telling us is that, look, live in penury, suffer while I live in affluence. That is not how a government that is sensitive to the crisis of governance, that is not how a government that appreciates the very terrible economic situation of a country is supposed to behave. So I am not optimistic. I don't want to have that false sense of hope that things will just magically get better, that we will wake up one day and Naira will now become 150 to $1, that we'll wake up one day and the price of fuel will reduce. What we are seeing is that commodity pricing is getting worse. Things that the cost of basic services are increasing. So we are seeing students who are unable to pay their school fees, right? And the government is not doing things to ameliorate the situation. Rather, public funds are being dissipated. Look at, you have a president that has 48 ministers, but 47 to 48 ministers. In a country that is barely surviving, in a country that is borrowing to service existing debts, and you are appointing a cabinet of about 47 to 48 ministers, you are going to COPA with abominable number of delegates. So I don't understand what the optimism should be about. Because if the government is truly serious about reviving the country, right, by now, Tinubu should have prioritized recovery money stolen and misappropriated under the former administration. But we are not seeing that. Nobody is doing that. So I, unfortunately, at this time, I'm not very optimistic. I'm not very hopeful. And I don't want us to engage, in this embarrassment of praying. And this is where some of us disagree with, I don't want to mention names, but with some of our religious leaders who keep telling Nigerians to pray. I stopped praying for Nigeria many years ago because I became conscious of the fact that the problems of Nigeria are not spiritual. There is no fasting, there is no prayer that will make the Naira to appreciate. If you like, pray, fast, let everybody go on 60 years fasting. Nigeria is not going to get better.
And our children
I diagnose it. In his book, The Trouble with Nigeria, the problem is squarely that of leadership. There is no witchcraft in Aso Rock. There is no witchcraft in Aso Rock. There is no demon in the National Assembly. The demons in the National Assembly are human beings. The witchcraft in the villa are human beings. These are the people holding the country down.
There's no snake eating the documentation.
Absolutely not. So we are not going to pray our way out of this situation. What we need is a government that is responsible, is a government that is attentive, is a government that is sensitive. You have to be sensitive to the suffering of the people. Look at the protests in Bauchi. People went to protest and they even got the women arrested.
Thank you.
Can you imagine? So for me, this government needs to ask itself what it really wants to be remembered for. I think that is the point I want to make.
Thank you so much. I know our second guest, Fagbenro-Byron, has more to add to that. Yes. In line with what Tinibehe has said, Nigerians have been going through a lot. And this is not this year, last year, 2 years ago, 10 years. It's over 60 years of so much regression. I think poverty was about 15, 20% at the time of independence, hiked up to over 80, 85, 90% today. And we tend to forget a lot. I think some of us in the comfortable zone tend to forget or tend to really realize the depth of suffering when we say, oh, pray, oh, have hope. Nigerians are watching their children die of malnutrition, of lack of food. Nigerians are not able to feed their families. Nigerians are scrambling for a tuber of yam. Nigerians are digging up trash cans for food to eat. Nigerians, their homes have been demolished. They've been rendered homeless. The issues are deep.
Humongous.
What is the call to action?
Well, I want to thank you, and I want to thank my brother for his comments. I mean, look, and you cannot fault people at this stage that would be passionate and would actually feel very bad. And a lot of people, even those who are supporters of the government in power now, have lent their voices, you know, to try and expand what people are saying. Having said that, what is the way forward and what do we do about it? When you've had a problem for years and it's perennial, the best you can do is to change the way you normally operate. The first thing I will ask this government, I will appeal to this government, is that voices of objection, voices of dissent, voices of expression of pain should not be seen as antagonistic voices.
Very important.
They should be seen as a barometer. What governments in Nigeria, and I'm old enough to say, tend to do when they get it, because the nature and the complaint and the responses of this government, of some of the spokespeople for this government now, is not very different from that of the previous government, even the previous one, even Jonathan's own. Because I recall in Jonathan's government, when they said, there was a publication which says that opposition wants to bring Jonathan's government down. And this was at a time when a number of people were complaining. The same thing is being said. So what I'm saying in essence is that, number one, the first thing this government should try and avoid is to create an echo chamber where it hears only the voices of its own people and party men. Once you avoid that, you allow voices, you allow people to start, give you feedback. The only way you can succeed in life is if you get feedback on what you are doing. And if you take that feedback very seriously, they say you don't take criticisms personally. You don't take criticism personally, you take them seriously.
As a public leader.
As a public leader. So I will urge them to do just that. Now, there are three things you will need in governance. For you to be successful, you need to be capable. That's one. You need to be accountable to the people. That is, to be able to respond to the people's, questions. You should be able to be ready to respond. And the third thing, you have to be responsive. Responsive in the sense that, yes, when you are not in power, when we were campaigning for the presidency, we said we'll do this, we will do that. We knew, or at least those of us who are experienced enough in governance will know that when we get into government, we will meet at least 40% of what we never anticipated for. And how do we now respond to it? So yes, it is okay for you as a government in power to say, oh, the previous government did this, it did that. I mean, you're less justified to say it when it was the same power, same party. But having said there are different governments, you can say, yes, the previous government did this and they didn't do this and so forth. However, you don't dwell on that. You dwell on what your solutions are. For me, I think we should also change the way in which we run Nigeria. In the days when our economy was working, when we had a different kind of configuration, when we had the sort of the control, the management, and the control and management of this country in a way that was spread along the regions and more manageable, we didn't have this kind of a problem. I believe maybe when this government wants to start looking for solutions, they don't look for solutions that are national, for problems that can be addressed regionally. The causes for insecurity in the Northeast is different from the causes of insecurity in the Southwest. The causes and the solutions for insecurity in the Northeast is different from the causes and solutions for insecurity in the Southeast. I would suggest that the president gather governors within each of these regions on an isolated look. Come up with your solutions, come up with problems in your region on how we can accelerate food security. The issue is tripartite. Security, there is justice. After you deal with security and you deal with justice, including economic justice,
very important.
right? Commercial justice, human rights, first of all, security justice, then you will have growth. Then if when you have growth, you run your government as an inclusive government, then you get development. You see, that's how it works. Another omission I believe that this government could have, it was a missed opportunity, was at the time you reel out economic policy, right? There is also social policy. You see, economic policy, the gestation period for you to feel economic policy is a number of years, a number of months. But you start having the social effect of economic policy immediately. So what should have been done is, as you put in your financial gurus and economic gurus to put out a policy, you must have had in place social development experts, poverty experts, people who understand how these economic, take away the subsidy, do whatever what you... Nigerians did not really want to take away subsidy from people. Nigerians wanted you to take the corruption that was within the subsidy.
The cost of governance.
Yes, it is the corruption within the subsidy. How are the Nigerian people being subsidized? There is no way, there is nothing else that the Nigerian people are being subsidized.
Thank you
but
so much.
but when you make, there is what is called the use of something, there is an abuse. The subsidy was abused. Deal with the abuse of the subsidy. Run a social development policy, robust enough with sufficient experts. What we have now is that these so-called palliatives are an afterthought. Or, you see, you give palliative to a man who is going to die. You get my point. And slightly, just my last comment before I go to respond to my brother, when he says renewed hope, hope is hope. Whether you renew it, whether you refresh it. The fact that you need to renew it means that something happened to the previous hope. Once hope is gone, hope is gone. Those are nomenclatures. Anybody can say and make, don't let us dwell too much on what they call it or what they didn't call it. It is what they did. Just as you say, you go for an interview, you say, these are my qualifications. Your qualifications is different. What can you do?
Right.
What should we be doing now?
We're going to take a very quick break. When we come back, we're going to continue on our discussion of how to rise above current economic hardships. Welcome back to Perspectives here on Arise News, where we are still joined by Mr. Fagbenro-Byron and Mr. Inibehe Effiong. So going on to you, Mr. Inibehe Effiong. Why don't I pronounce tell me your full name.
Inibehe Effiong.
Inibehe Effiong. Okay.
Yes.
Got it.
Effiong is sweet.
The surname. Inibehe is sweeter, if you know what it means.
Inibehe.
Yes.
What does it mean?
The time has not passed.
The time has not passed.
Yes.
The time for greater Nigeria is still coming.
So hope is there.
Hope is there. Okay, so about 1%
Yes.
of Nigerians live affluently, and there's a greater percentage living in extreme hardship. We're aware of that. And that 1%, majority of them are made up of public officials. At a time where there's so much hardship and difficulties, we are aware that Nigerians are going through so much,
Yes.
and human rights are being infringed upon on a daily basis. When people can't have basic medications and they are watching their children suffer.
Yes.
Can you give us a case? I know you're an activist, you're a lawyer, a situation whereby you've been able to sort of help someone within the confinement of hardship.
Well, in fact, before I go to specifics, when this president was campaigning, he told us that he will recruit people into the army. And the question was, what will they eat? He said, cassava, agbado. Today, our soldiers can't even afford agbado. Cassava, gari, ewa. Those things are not affordable today. I don't know if President Tinubu is aware. Right? He said the farmers will make more money. Farmers are not making more money. Right? Because even in communities, agricultural communities like Benue, insecurity is ravaging the means of production. People's farms are being destroyed. Tinubu has not done anything about it. So I'm just reminding President Tinubu that at a minimum, he promised Nigerians agbado. So if you cannot give us milk, basic food, at least give us agbado. Don't let Nigerians die of starvation. But on a more serious note, people are going through hell. Just this morning, I made a post on social media, X and Facebook, asking Nigerians to share the cost, the prices of basic commodities where they live. Hundreds of comments. You'll be astonished. You'll be astonished that things are so terrible. Things are so bad. When Nigeria won and qualified for the finals, won the semi-finals and qualified for the defeated South Africa, I was among those who were very excited. And I did what we call a giveaway. I said, okay, I'll just give 50,000 naira 8 times to 10 people, 5,000. You'll be astonished that in less than an hour, there were thousands of comments. So what this shows you is that many people can't even afford basic square meals. Cannot afford 3 square meals. I've had families, I've had individuals on a daily basis asking for as little as 500, 1,000. 500, 1,000. I know families that they can't even afford school fees for their children who are in private schools. This morning, as I was about coming to the studio, a gentleman messaged me on X and said, please, these are my admission papers. I am not able to afford school fees to go to law school. This morning. So I see this request, dozens of them on a daily basis. That is in addition to those that I see within the neighborhood, within the environment. So things are really terrible. Things are really bad. That even egg, a crate of egg, is now over 3,000. People can't even afford the most basic things. So when you look at how prices of commodities are rising, a bag of cement is now over 7,000. It's terrible. So how will families feed with 30,000 as minimum wage? The cost of transportation now has increased significantly. So you can imagine a family where the father earns 100,000, right? And let's say he lives on the mainland and he has to go to the island daily. He uses public transportation. In a month, he would have spent a significant part of that income on transportation. Right? If you now have I better pass my neighbor, the small generator that people acquire. Because, I mean, public power supplies is not barely there. So, when you look at the needs, the basic needs of the ordinary Nigerians today, they are not being met. But Section 16 of our Constitution contains the fundamental objective and directive principle of state policy on the economy and provides that the government shall ensure that the wealth of the nation is not concentrated in the hand of a few, and that the government shall even provide shelter. The government shall ensure that citizens have the means, the resources, and access to capital to be able to afford their basic needs.
Absolutely.
The government has failed that constitutional obligation. Right? Things have gotten bad. Factories are closing down. Opposite my office, there's a shopping complex that was open. And I kept noticing that they are not getting the patronage they're supposed to have. As I speak to you, they have closed down a church as quite taking the place. It is now a worship center. This is directly opposite my office.
Pray.
So what we have is that religious centers, mosques and churches are increasing, but more people are going into poverty. Right? If Nigeria is prospering, if there's prosperity in our country today, it is religion. And that is not how we should go. And guess what? As bad as things are, because let's not just focus on, oh, the president has done this, at the state level, the governors, Yobe State, there's a report that came out yesterday that the Yobe State government is budgeting or planning to spend about 300 million for 2 TVs and 2 air conditioners. I don't know whether they have not denied it, but this is a report. And about 210 million for graveyards. A government wants to spend 210 million for renovation of graveyards to take care of the dead when the living cannot even survive.
But we hear these stories every day.
So what I am telling you, I mean, in Lagos, we saw the amount that our own governor, Mr. Sanwo-Olu, budgeted for deodorants, air freshener. Right? Of course, I mean, if things are so bad, you need a freshener to detoxify the environment. And I'm speaking hypothetically now, right? To say that our leaders are blind, our leaders are deaf to the reality. And you know my concern. You know my concern. People are being pushed to the wall. We haven't learned from NSAS. One would have thought that with the NSAS protest, that politicians will realize that Nigerians can actually wake up one day and hit the streets.
This week saw an increase in protests, uprisings and protests.
I'm telling you that they are still blind to it. The APC issued a statement saying that the protest is being sponsored by their opponents, by opposing parties. Can you imagine?
And not the depth of hardship.
Can you imagine the recklessness? Can you imagine the audacity to make such outrageous comments? So what this tells you is that this is a government that is not willing, that is not prepared to attend to the yearnings of the people. And I want to emphasize again that a president under whose government prices of inflation has skyrocketed, prices of commodities have gone so high, has no business. Have you seen Tinubu's convoy lately? The number of vehicles?
There was a video of over 50 cars sometime.
Why are you being modest? What steps have they taken to reduce the presidential fleet? Rather, it is still the same culture of ostentation. It is still the same culture of waste. These are resources that can be channeled to healthcare.
Absolutely.
He just came back from France on what they call a private visit. I don't understand what a private visit is. I had gone to court under the Buhari administration, or the Buhari regime as I prefer to call it, to challenge the constitutionality of the president going on private visit. Of course, the court said I didn't have local stand-by. We are now at the Court of Appeal on the matter. A president has no business going on private visits without handing over. But the point I'm making is that Tinubu went on private visit for about 2 weeks or so, came back, and was being welcomed by government officials for what was a private visit.
So much work.
For what was a private visit, right? So you have a president that continuously travels abroad, right? And then he seems not to realize that things are really bad. So what is the way out?
So let me bring in Mr. Byron for the next question. They will come to you with the call to action, with the way forward, the way out.
Okay.
Mr. Byron,
Yes,
Nigeria is indeed a very rich nation. He said part of it. We have money.
Yes.
We have natural resources. We have human capabilities. We have the brains. We have so much. We are blessed.
Yes.
We are the giants, or supposed to be, capable of being the giants of Africa, of the world. But we see so much affluence in public leadership. And then at the bottom, which happens to be majority of the population, we see barely nothing. But maybe we're not seeing these things. Maybe government is actually providing some services that we are not seeing. I am seeing the increases in homelessness across the nation. I am seeing the increase in begging. I am seeing the people who are messaging me on a daily basis crying out for help. I am seeing people suffering. What are the remedies? What is government providing? What are the social benefits to Nigerians? Homeless shelter. Where can Nigerians turn to when all seems bleak?
Well, you know, number one, I'm not in government.
But you have hope.
I do have hope. And the first thing I do is, when I'm out of government, the first thing for me to be meaningful is to first sincerely wish whoever is in government succeeds. And some of the things that will make them succeed, we have said. Number one, you must listen. No matter how bitter, no matter how caustic a criticism is, They must gather, they must listen to it, so your basket of ideas can be enriched. You can interrogate. Even if you don't agree with what the opposition is saying, you can benchmark it against your solutions and use it to strengthen and justify your solutions. So it's an attitudinal thing, which is not restricted to this political party or this government alone. It is an attitudinal thing of Nigerians. They say you never know a man's true character until you give him money and you give him power. That is when certain things are revealed. A number of people in government, they have been in government before. Having said that, there are a raft of people who will follow them, a raft of hangers-on, a raft of advisors who will say, Oga, don't mind them. They are your enemies. Don't mind them. They didn't support you. If we don't get out of that space, right, we may not listen to solutions. Now, Nigerians are suffering and things are pretty bad. The distance between the rich or those who, people are getting richer, right? The rich are getting richer. The poor are living a pretty miserable life. However, in any country when there is this kind of depression, there is crisis, there are two things you can do. Number one, you can actually engage everybody. When America was passing through its Great Depression in the 1930s, FDR established the Tennessee Valley Authority, and it built a huge infrastructure project which engaged, it was labor intensive, had great significance to the economy of America. You can do the same for Nigeria now on a region by region basis. The government should straight away, as a matter of urgency, design large infrastructure projects that are labor intensive, infrastructure projects that will meet the needs of each region. In the north, for example, you have a forestation issue. Nigeria is supposed to have implemented a green belt of tree planting across the northern borders. That in itself will engage 100,000 youths immediately, just to plant and manage trees. Borrowing from my own manifesto when I was presidential candidate, I proposed, in order to reclaim the Lake Chad, building a pipeline, a water pipeline from the coast of Calabar down to Lake Chad. Highly labor intensive. The whole idea is that you kill four birds with one stone, especially when you have desalination plants carrying the water from the ocean to Lake Chad. You refill that Lake Chad itself. You do the agric. When we were growing up, Lake Chad used to be a tourist attraction. The lake was as huge as the entire mass of Lagos Island, if not larger. You know, so you have to reclaim that place, build sanitation plants, but you know the number of people you will employ just along that line. So you need to create programs and projects that will meet. Look at the Southeast, for example. There's a massive erosion problem that can be addressed with the combination of states. So what I'm saying, in essence, is another way of saying that, look, use a regional approach to state development, to national development. Number one, you are bringing the solutions down to earth. They are more endogenous solutions. You are engaging the people more. And just like my brother said, you can't remove the state governments and the role the state governments should have. And this is why I say that the president should have that discussion with state governors, not just all of them, per region, for them to bring out the solutions. The president cannot have all the solutions. And for him to be able to deploy, but he can draw the solutions from where the problems are. So that is an approach. Decentralize the solution gathering, decentralize the problems design, go into large infrastructure projects, humongously large infrastructure projects that will employ hundreds of thousands of youths.
Mr. Byron,
yes,
we've been talking for 60 years.
Yes.
We've been talking for the past 1 year.
Yes.
We'll continue talking for another 20, 30, 40
and
years.
You invited me to talk.
But absolutely. But we can advise. But you made a statement when I said, you have hope. You said you always wish people well.
You
wish
have
the
to
president
wish them well.
But I want to ask you this.
Yes.
If I was the worst journalist possible, would you continue to wish me being the worst journalist? And if you had an employee who found out that the background check was criminal and his curriculum vitae was completely fraudulent, forged, would you continue to have that person hired?
If you were in media and you had taken off on a plane and you had a pilot there and you discovered that the pilot was less than what you thought, right? You are going to wish him that by accident, by design, by hook, by mistake, he will succeed. That is the way we are. You know that's yes, you will have to, because what is the reality, right? Sorry, I'm a bit stoic on this. The reality on ground is that Tinubu is the president. It is possible that tomorrow he listens to what Effiong is saying. It is possible tomorrow he looks at somebody who is messing up in government and fires the person.
And if he doesn't, will the poverty rate continue to increase?
Of course it will. There are consequences of inaction. I am not saying there are no consequences of inaction, but I want to believe and I want to hope for the sake of all of us, right? Because the consequences of failure at this point in time, right, it's more dire than I thought. I predicted in 2019 when I was campaigning that this is precisely what is going to happen. You get my point? Having said that, you see, for things to work, it's us. And you see, no matter how much we say the president is there and, you know, there are leaders there, there's a demand side to government, there's a supply side to government. Those in power today are supposed to provide what they claim they will provide in their manifestos, in their promises, according to their responsibilities. We, on the other side, we will continue to demand for good governance. As long as we're demanding, we shouldn't stop. We should continue to point out and suggest ideas. It behoves them to pick the good ideas to elaborate. And I say, and this is why I said that they shouldn't create an echo chamber. You see, you create an echo chamber when the only people you want to listen to are people who are in your party, people who voted for you, people who you like their faces, people who you like the sound of their names. Then eventually at the end of the day, the only people in the room will be the people who say, yes, sir, you are the best, sir. You are the best next to sliced bread. If the president, I believe, Tinubu has a record of being able to break away from just listening to Anina, you know. He's had that record before as governor. Yes, he has. The evidence is there, where he had 2, 3, 4 governors where they were excluded from politics, and he made sure. I mean, there are other presidents who have demonstrated the capacity to go outside the sphere of closed circuit to listen to people. What we are saying now is because what Effiong has said, for example, is that, look, listen. If you listen, this is what this is. All the people are doing is provide feedback. The feedback is coming from, some are talking more sentimental, some are being emotional, but the feedback is the feedback, and the feedback is nearer the truth than nearer falsehood. That is just the truth. The accumulative effect of the past, even from Obasanjo's regime, because Obasanjo would have made things much, much better if he had not missed his road looking for a third time.
I want to bring in Mr. Effiong. In rounding up, your final words, any call to action in rising above extreme economic hardship?
In December 2023, the FAG, the federal allocation between states, the 3 tiers of government, was 1.1 trillion. 1.1 trillion was shared as revenue between federal, state, and local governments. Of course, we know local governments in Nigeria only exist on paper. Governors have made it parastatals of the states. Now, what has been done with this money? For me, 2 things stand out as solutions to a national malady. First is, there has to be drastic reduction in the cost of governance. The second is institutional reforms. Let me start with cost of governance, and I've already spoken to that. My concern is that nobody's listening. Apart from the president, the governors are even worse. Because at the federal level, there is even some pretension of accountability. You can have maybe a motion in the House of Reps or in the Senate, nothing might come out of it, but there's still some semblance of attempts at checks and balances. At the state level, it is zero. There is no House of Assembly today that can hold a governor accountable. Not in Lagos, not in Akwa Ibom, not in Zamfara, not even in Rivers. Where you see what looks like conflict is where it is political, not about the interests of the people. So governance needs to be rechecked. There has to be reduction in the cost of governance. Regarding institutional reforms,
very important.
You are not going to solve the problem of the country if you don't reform our law enforcement agency. You are not going to revive faith of Nigerians in their government if you don't reform institutions, the police, the judiciary, and so on. So let these things be prioritized. Let the president realize that time is running. He will leave that office someday. What will history remember Tinubu for? I think that is a question Tinubu should be thinking about every day.
Fantastic episode. Thank you both for joining us. Thank you for the informational input. We have to run.
Thank you.
Nigeria's current economic formula is petrodollars minus effective leadership, which equals very high poverty. Nigeria can develop into one of the world's strongest countries with strong humane decisions, strong industries, and strong educated citizens. Enough of the suffering and smiling. Time to show strength in unity. Time to show that we care about every Nigerian suffering through hardship. Every human deserves a good life of humane dignity, quality education, and merited success. Our world needs a much stronger dosage of healthy love and greater humanity. My name is Olatorera Oniru, and I am an unyieldingly certain that Greater Nigeria would make the world a much better place. Thank you for watching Perspectives. Thank you to our special guests for joining us today. Have a great weekend and see you all soon. Goodbye.